Welcome to the Past in Pictures channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. The wristwatch recovered from the wreckage in Hiroshima remains as a quiet record of the exact moment when a nuclear device struck the city on August 6, 1945, the mechanism stopping at 8:15 in the morning, preserving the extreme heat and pressure that reached the area. Sergeant Francis Daggert of the United States 11th Armored Division Military Police holds the hand of a young Wehrmacht fighter, and on April 27, 1945, the boy, only 10 years old, was detained in the German city of Kronach, showing the recruitment of children in the final days of the conflict. Two children walk the streets of Naples amid the social impact of a major world conflict in Italy, as one boy supports a friend with limited mobility who uses crutches, and the 1944 image by Henri Cartier-Bresson shows human resilience. December 20, 1973 was marked by the attack in Madrid that led to the death of Prime Minister Luis Carrero Blanco, as the force of the blast beneath the street hurled his vehicle onto a building and created a deep political shock that hastened the end of the regime and the country's democratic transition. Chinese sailor Poon Lim survived 133 days adrift in the Atlantic Ocean after his ship was hit during the Second World War, and using this improvised wooden raft, he was finally rescued on April 5, 1943 off the coast of Brazil, becoming a symbol of endurance. A patient held at the West Riding Pauper Lunatic Asylum in Victorian England appears restrained by metal devices in the second half of the 19th century, as such physical restraint methods were common in British psychiatric institutions of the era to control inmates. The Space Shuttle Columbia shines under floodlights at the Kennedy Space Center during final preparations for mission Space Transportation System 1, and the event began a new era in orbital exploration with the first flight of a reusable vehicle on April 12, 1981, setting crucial advances in aerospace engineering. The French battleship Jean Bart, under the Vichy government, shows major structural damage after being hit by United States forces in Casablanca, and on November 16, 1942, the action marked a critical moment involving French resistance during Allied operations in North Africa. Arms reached through cell bars at Attica Correctional Facility in New York for a chess game in 1972, capturing a moment of mental interaction and strategy amid severe isolation and reflecting daily life for prisoners in the complex. During the Spanish Civil War in 1936, many groups formed popular militias to resist the advance of nationalist forces, and symbols like the sickle and hammer on helmets signaled the ideological alignment of fighters defending the Republic. A soldier appears hunched over with his face in his hands in 1944, exhausted by the hardships of the world conflict, and the image captures the psychological weight and strain endured in the most intense areas, reflecting the deep human cost in one of history's most decisive years. A small cat floats inside the cockpit of an F-94C Starfire fighter aircraft during a zero-gravity experiment run by the United States Air Force, and the test took place in 1958 after the aircraft reached high altitude and performed a dive maneuver, as researchers sought to understand the effects of weightlessness. A Chesapeake and Ohio T1 locomotive shows severe consequences of a boiler failure near Chillicothe in 1943, as a tangle of exposed tubes reveals the force of internal pressure that turned a powerful rail machine into an unrecognizable structure on the tracks. George Davey was only 10 years old when he was sentenced to 1 month of forced service at Wandsworth Prison in London in 1872. The boy received a harsh punishment after being caught taking 2 rabbits, showing how strict the Victorian justice system could be with children. Children were placed in suspended cages outside apartment windows in 1930 to provide fresh air and sunlight in dense cities, and the practice spread after medical guidance of the time promoted ventilation for child health, changing the look of big city buildings. The Morrison indoor shelter was given free to low-income families in the United Kingdom in 1941 as protection against air raids, and its cage-like metal design let people sleep inside the frame, providing an essential layer of safety during nighttime attacks. Relatives of teacher Krista McAuliffe witnessed the Space Shuttle Challenger incident at the Kennedy Space Center in January 1986, and the image captures the shock of her parents and sister in the exact moment, turning what was meant to be a milestone in civilian spaceflight into a national tragedy. During the 1930s, the Great Depression caused severe economic hardship in many countries. Lines of children waiting for free soup and bread became common at schools, showing community efforts to fight child hunger in a time of extreme scarcity. British troops put up an information sign at the entrance of Bergen-Belsen on May 29, 1945, describing the liberation on April 15, 1945, and reporting the discovery of many losses, serving as a memorial to the consequences of the prior regime and the human impact across Europe. Construction workers in New York faced extremely dangerous conditions during the city's vertical boom in 1930. And without modern safety gear, they balanced on steel beams hundreds of yards above the ground to raise the skyscrapers that would define the skyline. The first confirmed photograph of Abraham Lincoln is a daguerreotype taken by Nicholas H. Shepard in 1846, made shortly after his election to the United States House of Representatives, and showing the future president decades before the challenges of the Civil War. Nikola Tesla appears calmly seated in his Colorado Springs lab as his magnifying transmitter produces high-voltage electrical discharges, and the December 1899 image used double exposure to capture both the inventor and the man-made lightning in the same frame. Anita Ekberg's career reached new horizons after she won the Miss Sweden contest and traveled to the United States. And during the 1950s, her presence in Hollywood helped cement her shift from model to movie star before her global fame in iconic Italian productions. Sailors and officers aboard the United States ship Blue Ridge carry out a drastic maneuver during Operation Frequent Wind. And to make room for incoming aircraft loaded with refugees, on April 30, 1975, Huey helicopters were pushed into the sea in a strategic coordinated move. A statue looks down from the City Hall tower at widespread damage in central Dresden after intense air raids, and the ruins and collapsed structures show the scale of destruction in the German city on February 15, 1945, highlighting the human and material impact of the conflict's end in Europe. The watertight doors of the Royal Mail ship Titanic were designed in 1912 as an essential safety feature for the ocean liner, using a hydraulic system to seal lower compartments if the hull was damaged, a technology seen as innovative for early 20th century marine engineering. The massive oil tanker Amoco Cadiz caused one of the largest environmental disasters recorded in Europe, and after a rudder failure on March 16, 1978, it struck rocks off the coast of Brittany, France, breaking apart and releasing thousands of tons of cargo that harmed local marine life. The launch of Bumper 2 on July 24, 1950, began aerospace activity at Cape Canaveral, Florida, as the two-stage rocket reached record heights for its time and served as a key test for future orbital missions, marking an early step into modern space exploration. President Richard Nixon walks the deck of the United States ship Hornet to greet the Apollo 11 astronauts, and the meeting happened on July 24, 1969, shortly after the Columbia capsule splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, reinforcing one of the greatest milestones in space exploration and global technology. The Apollo 15 crew poses in 1971, with their customized corvettes in patriotic colors alongside the lunar rover, and the iconic image links the golden age of American car culture with space exploration while highlighting the astronauts' lifestyle. United States Navy divers performed the final steps to hoist the Apollo 15 command module, and the recovery took place in the Pacific Ocean after the successful return from the Moon, with the United States ship Okinawa waiting to take the capsule aboard on August 7, 1971. The Loaner Porsche hybrid vehicle was an extraordinary technical innovation around 1902, combining a gasoline engine with batteries and four-wheel electric drive, and the horseless carriage shows how early automotive engineering was already exploring alternative propulsion at the start of the 20th century. In 1940, wartime shortages of textiles changed daily life for women in Europe and the United States, and with nylon diverted to parachute production, women used special dyes to imitate the look of sheer stockings on their legs. Daily life at the front during the Second World War pushed soldiers into odd improvisations to keep morale up, and using heavy equipment to light cigarettes when matches were unavailable shows human adaptation during the conflict that began on September 1, 1939 in Central Europe. German soldiers celebrate Christmas in 1914 during the first year of the world conflict, and the image shows small decorated trees and candles in the trenches, symbolizing the informal truce that took place in December and marking a rare moment of humanity on the Western Front. American Marines landed Red Beach 2 north of Da Nang on March 8, 1965, marking the deployment of the first United States combat troops to Vietnam and signaling escalation as the soldiers moved through the water with heavy gear to establish a base. After the German surrender in May 1945, members of Easy Company took over a retreat in the Bavarian Alps, and Richard Winters and his men were photographed in a rare moment of rest with the mountains behind them, symbolizing the final Allied victory in Europe. A crowd in the streets of Tianjin shows visible excitement at the arrival of American troops in October 1945, as the end of foreign occupation brought immediate relief and filled the city blocks between storefronts and period signs. Finnish boy Nestori Lindström was only 11 when he ran away from home to volunteer on the Northern Front, and during the Continuation War from 1941 to 1944, he tried to help his country's troops against the Soviet advance, symbolizing how conflict affected Europe's far north. German children turn a disabled armored vehicle into an improvised playground amid the damaged structures of a heavily affected city in 1945, and the contrast between childhood innocence and the ruins of conflict reflects post-war life in Europe, with the abandoned vehicle standing as a still reminder of collapse in German streets. A veteran of the famed 101st Airborne Division returned to the village of Hauteville in June 2022. And at that exact spot in Normandy, he once guarded a detainee during the Allied advance that began on June 6, 1944 in occupied France. The facade of Palazzo Braschi in Rome was transformed for the 1934 elections with a massive propaganda installation as a stylized portrait of the political leader over a repeated backdrop aimed to reinforce ideological control in Italy and shows modernist aesthetics used in service of the state. During an official visit to the Soviet Union on May 23, 1963, Fidel Castro was photographed in a diplomatic meeting with Nikita Khrushchev, drawing attention for smoking a cigar and wearing two luxury watches on the same wrist, as the meeting symbolized strategic alignment at the height of the Cold War. Diplomatic accounts record a visit by a Finnish parliament delegation to North Korea in 1975, and a meeting between President Urho Kekkonen and leader Kim Il-sung strengthened political ties, celebrated with large portraits and flags in a decorated hall. The fossilized skeleton of Archelon, a giant turtle from the Cretaceous period, is striking at about 15 feet 1 inch long, and in 1902, this specimen weighing more than about 4,400 pounds was displayed at the Yale Museum, strengthening research on prehistoric wildlife. The legendary Frisian rebel Peer Gerlof's Donia, popularly known as Gruta Peer, used this enormous sword measuring about 7 feet during 16th century conflicts, and in 1951 it was photographed at the Friesland Museum in Leeuwarden, where it remains a cultural symbol. In 1936, an ambitious proposal aimed to change the tourist experience in the French capital, calling for monumental spiral ramps so automobiles could drive up to the second level of the Eiffel Tower, blending road modernity with the landmark. Jean Bugatti proudly poses beside a Bugatti Royale in 1932, representing the peak of automotive luxury of the era, and only 7 were made, intended solely for royalty and the global elite because of its unique engineering and design. During the filming of Spartacus in 1960, the young director Stanley Kubrick showed his technical obsession by photographing details with his own camera, and among thousands of extras and massive equipment, his artistic vision shaped the Roman epic, helping establish the meticulous style that would define his filmmaking. The iconic Japanese production of 1954 introduced the world to the kaiju concept in a distinctive way, and behind-the-scenes actor Haruo Nakajima sought brief relief from the heat between takes, as this production photo highlights the practical effects work that formed the foundation of the genre in film. The American band Lynyrd Skynyrd took the stage at the Knebworth Festival in England on August 21, 1976, and in front of a massive crowd, the group strengthened its influence in Southern rock during a historic European tour, remembered for the performance energy and the huge response from British fans. Elvis Presley's childhood in Tupelo shows the humble roots of one of the biggest figures in world music, and in 1938, the young boy posed beside Gladys and Vernon, showing the simplicity of his Mississippi family before fame reshaped global popular culture. Television cooking took on a new shape in 1964 with the production of The French Chef, and Julia Child appears behind the scenes, showing the technical complexity needed to bring French recipes into American homes through a teaching-focused format that was innovative in broadcast history. Ronald Reagan poses at the University of Southern California in 1940 as a model for art students, chosen by the Fine Arts Department as an example of the ideal male physique, reflecting the aesthetic and cultural standards of the time. Employees and iconic characters gather in front of the monumental gates of Universal Orlando Resort to celebrate its official opening. And on June 7, 1990, the complex opened in Florida, signaling a new era of themed entertainment built around globally successful movies and television. The 1960s in Las Vegas were marked by the architectural sophistication of icons like the Tropicana Hotel, and in front of its imposing facade model, Kitty Nolan posed for cameras beside a classic car, capturing the golden age of entertainment and the visual glamour that shaped the city's identity. 3 women show elegance at the Prince of Wales Grand Prix, held at the Longchamp racetrack in May 1908, and their refined outfits and decorated hats capture Paris fashion of the Belle Époque and the French high society of the early 20th century. In a perspective trick in 1943, a woman sitting on the sand holds 2 friends far away as if they were tiny in her palm, and the scene plays with distance and angle by lining up people in horizon to fool the eye, a fun record of how creativity brightened an ordinary day at the beach. An ice hockey game in Sweden had to be stopped in 1959 because the surface unexpectedly melted, and players are seen trying to keep balance while others fall into icy water, showing the risks of outdoor play on natural lakes before artificial rinks became widespread. Workers wade through shallow water and thick vegetation to recover a stuck automobile in the Florida Everglades, and the hands-on effort highlights the mobility challenges early drivers faced in swampy terrain in 1916, illustrating the persistence needed to push into natural frontiers. Italian inventor Davide Cislaghi tests his innovative single-wheel motorized vehicle in France, and the prototype sought new solutions for personal transportation with a bold design for 1933, exemplifying the era's mechanical creativity. Inventor Jay Lahadra presents his exotic tracked motorcycle designed for rough terrain, using tank-like traction to stay stable on uneven surfaces, and the 1939 prototype demonstration highlights the period's mechanical creativity. An automobile lifts its front wheels in a stunt before a crowd on a city street with tracks, and the image captures what is considered the first photographed car wheel stand in 1936, showing the driver's skill and public fascination with automotive progress. London's Metropolitan Transit System showed platforms packed with advertisements in the early 20th century, and among posters for condensed milk and many products, passengers waited for trains in Victorian-style tunnels, as this pioneering network linked the metropolis and permanently changed urban mobility worldwide. Workers labor on the assembly line at National Cash Register in Dayton, Ohio in 1894, and the machines made there could ring up sales up to the limit of $9.99, reflecting the economic and retail world of the late 19th century. Child labor was a common reality in the early 20th century, as shown by this 1913 record in Waco, where an 8-year-old boy holds his newspapers in the street while wearing formal clothes and a cap, reflecting Texas social and economic dynamics of the time. A blacksmith works on maintaining horseshoes in Christabel, Texas in 1900, and a curious caption from the time calls it the tire change of that era, showing how animal power was still the main transportation before automobiles became common. A Scottish blacksmith works intensely to shoe a horse in 1921 under a thick cloud of smoke rising from the hoof, as the traditional hot-fitting process required skill and strength and was essential for mobility and rural work in Scottish communities of the period. A Hungarian girl smiles while using a rustic wooden walker known as kati in a photo from the last century, and the device was widely used by farmers who needed to keep children safe and close while doing hard field work. Raised seats for children were used in vehicles during the 1950s, mainly so young passengers could see out the window, and without today's focus on crash safety, these seats were attached in a simple way on top of car benches. Families enjoy a leisure day at the beach in 1915 as children play at covering their father with sand, and the image captures period clothing like structured hats and dressy outfits, showing entertainment customs and social behavior in the early 20th century. The Paris Universal Exposition that opened on May 1, 1878, introduced the public to Henri Giffard's tethered balloon, able to carry 50 passengers at once and impressive for its size and the complexity of its support cables, marking progress in French lighter-than-air engineering. During the Paris Commune in 1871, revolutionaries built improvised barricades with cobblestones and artillery pieces to defend the city. And because of long exposure times, passers-by appear as blurred figures that preserve the urgency of the uprising. Mehmed VI, the last sultan of the Ottoman Empire, leaves Istanbul on November 17, 1922, ending a dynasty that lasted 6 centuries, and his departure aboard a British ship symbolized the final shift to the Republic of Turkey, deeply changing Middle Eastern geopolitics. White women protest against racial integration outside Calvary Church in Fort Worth, Texas, and on October 9, 1956, their signs promoted segregation in the Morningside community, showing the social tensions and prejudice present in the United States. Considered the oldest land animal in the world, the tortoise Jonathan was photographed in 1886 in the Seychelles Islands when he was already about 50 years old, capturing the reptile in its natural habitat, long before becoming a global symbol of longevity and biological resilience. A group of kids uses special glasses to read Mighty Mouse magazine in 1953, marking the release of the first 3-dimensional comic book, as the new technology aimed to change children's publishing by offering an immersive and novel visual experience for young readers of the decade. Psychiatric institutions in England in 1910 used restraint methods now seen as archaic, keeping patients in wooden cabinets that isolated the body while leaving only the head exposed in an attempt to control behavior, reflecting the complicated evolution of medicine. A British soldier uses the massive hull of an overturned German Tiger tank as shelter from the rain in 1944, capturing a pause during intense fighting of the Second World War and showing how wreckage was reused to meet immediate basic needs. The work office at the Reich Chancellery in Berlin showed monumental architecture around 1940, with a vast hall, high ceilings, and marble decoration that emphasized administrative power. Yet, despite its imposing design, the space was rarely used by the German leader. A samurai warrior shows his full armor and holds a katana in a fighting stance during the 1860s in Japan, capturing the end of the feudal era as the warrior class still kept its traditions and typical dress before the modernizing reforms of the Meiji Restoration. The Catholic priest Hans Schmidt emigrated from Germany to the United States after becoming involved in scandals in his home country, and in 1913, he gained international notoriety over serious accusations, becoming the only clergyman of his order to receive the maximum sentence under the American justice system. The book smuggler movement in Lithuania played a vital role in preserving cultural identity in the late 19th century, and Vinkus Juska carried literature banned by the Russian Empire to help local language and traditions survive the Russification policies imposed on the region. A young artist paints the Sacré-Cœur Basilica in Paris in 1946, standing on a cobblestone street and capturing the spirit of France's post-war cultural revival while preserving Montmartre's iconic architecture on canvas in the city's soft light. A young woman smiles as she is crowned Sausage Queen in 1956 during a promotional contest for the Hebrew national brand. And wearing necklaces made from real sausages, she represents an era of odd and curious marketing tactics that were common in the United States. Customers sit at an improvised counter at the Buku Diner in Harlingen, Texas in 1939, as the place sold hamburgers for just 5 cents and displayed ads for popular drinks, preserving a slice of American street food culture before the Second World War. Students cross a fast-moving river using a rudimentary pulley and rope system in Modena in 1959, and with no bridge available on the outskirts of the Italian city, the children relied on the improvised method to reach school, illustrating rural European infrastructure challenges. Axis officers cooperate in the field during Eastern Front operations around 1942, as Japanese correspondent Sunji Sasimoto accompanies Hungarian Major General György Rakovsky in the countryside while they watch troop movement under a cloudy sky. A man carries his elderly mother to take part in the first general elections of independent India in 1952, and the democratic vote symbolized the nation's political transition after decades of British colonial rule, mobilizing millions of voters in an unprecedented logistical effort in Asia. Injured Indian soldiers received medical care inside the Royal Pavilion in Brighton, converted into a medical center during the First World War. And in 1918, the palace's opulent architecture sheltered Commonwealth troops, showing Britain's war effort and the diversity of its fighters.